they come out with a flimsy excuse by saying it's the product of the union, the law. We know.
This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and WorkWeek has covered the struggle of workers, public workers, contract workers during the last shutdown. And today, millions of workers will be affected if the government is shut down again. And the last shutdown went on for a long time and hurt a lot of workers. And today we're with Gilbert Galam. He's with AFGE Local 1230. He's a TSA employee. He's legislative political coordinator for that local. And he was involved in the struggle at that time in the last shutdown and the effect on your members. So welcome to the show, Gilbert.
Thanks, Steve.
So Gilbert, why don't you talk about what happened last time and how it affected your members, the shutdown?
All right. So 2018 through 2019, we had the longest shutdown in U.S. history. 34 days. We went 34 days without pay. So that would amount to a lapse of about 2 checks. There are about 2 checks where TSOs were unpaid. Although we were required to work, we're deemed essential, yet there's no promise of pay. So we struggled with that for a long time, and many of our TSOs, they could not, a lot at the time. That was before we even had pay equity. Pay equity is what gave us our raises this year, where it gave us pay parity to the rest of the federal government. So that was even before that. So a lot of our TSOs were struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. Although I'd say that it's still the same today. We're still struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. So a lot of our workers and screeners, they could not make their rent checks. They could not pay their mortgages. A lot of them ended up going to food banks because of the shutdown. But the American public was extremely sympathetic to us. They finally understood our role and why we even existed. Like a lot of them brought food. A lot of them brought gift cards, gas cards to help the TSOs. So I think that was, even though that was like one of the lowest points for our workers, it was probably the highest points for public opinion for TSA.
And that struggle in 2018, 2019 went on for, as you say, over 30 days. And I know the air traffic controllers were burning out. I mean, the whole idea, why don't you talk about, burnout, and then you've got the stress already of the job that you're doing, plus the burnout of not being paid. It must be a terrible situation for your members and other workers who are in that situation.
Yes, for TSA screeners, we work very early, long shifts. So many of our start times start at 3:30, around 3:30 or 4 a.m., going on until like 12 in the afternoon. And that is not a normal shift. And also, like, we are horribly understaffed, especially at my airport. So we were still dealing with like a high load of passengers while having to, work unpaid. And it was really burning everybody out. Same thing with air traffic controllers. The air traffic controllers they're extremely understaffed. I think they're going through like a lot of employee turnover right now because a lot of employees are retiring out. We could go back to like why they're retiring, why there's a wave right now. Back to Reagan, but that's a conversation for another time. But yeah, it's like it was the worst timing. So I believe the air traffic controllers at the time were, because of burnout, we're starting to have a high amount of sick calls. And I think that's when Congress started to notice. And then they finally got everything in gear to get the budget funding through.
And Sara Nelson, the president of Airline Flight Attendants, AFGE1230, at that time said she was concerned about health and safety for workers and the public in these planes. And she actually said that there might have to be a general strike.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I remember that. That was one of the big things too. We were hoping that was going to happen, but luckily this was averted by what happened with the air traffic controllers. But I think all those things put together really like move Congress.
And 4 hours actually after Sara Nelson made that comment, that statement, Trump opened up the government.
Yeah.
So apparently they got the message that working people were getting fed up enough.
Yeah.
To really shut things down.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think it was only a matter of time before even because our workers were at the breaking point, and I think, man, I really have to give it to our screeners. They really just kept on showing up, but I think it was very close to like just a lot of people just saying, "Oh, I can't even I can't even pay gas anymore. I'm just not going to go to work." And I think
And
they're
of
all,
course, the
oh,
cost of living in the Bay Area and in urban centers, I mean, it's expensive rent. A lot of the workers have to commute to go to work. They can't afford to live, or if they live in the Bay Area, they have to have people who live with share space. I mean, it seems
yes,
like a very stressful situation, very difficult situation for workers.
it is. There were actually a lot of workers that were starting to take. I mean, like, we weren't required to be at work. I mean, there was no promise of pay, so technically management could not discipline us for showing up to work. So there were a lot of workers actually doing like gig work, doing Lyft, doing Uber, just trying to make ends meet. And I think in the agency that's actually looked down upon. But you got to do what you got to do so you can live, right? I mean, this living in California is really expensive. Uh, and I imagine I live in Sacramento, so the cost of living is not as high. It's still pretty high, but in the Bay Area, I imagine that problem is compounded.
And now we're facing a shutdown October 1st. And what is going on at your agency? And also, what does that say to the working people of this country and public workers about using their political agenda as a vehicle to say we're going to close down the entire government? It seems like a pretty radical threat, again, against millions of working people who are trying to do their job and survive.
Yeah, our agency is preparing like last time, sending emails out and communications that we're still essential and to show up to work. As far as Congress, I mean, they say they care about us, but they just treat us like pawns. They treat their workers like pawns. They don't actually care about workers, in my opinion. And I think they should really stop that. I mean, this is really an attack on the worker itself, just like the kind of budget they're pursuing. They're saying that the Freedom Caucus is looking to reduce top line numbers to 2022 levels, and that doesn't even make sense. It doesn't account for inflation. It doesn't account for the salaries that we just got. That would mean that we'd have to eradicate, or we'd have to furlough an extreme amount of TSA workers on the front line. That doesn't even make sense. I don't understand the reasoning or the rationale for these kind of numbers.
And there's also been an effort to privatize public service, contract out, outsourcing. Are you concerned about that issue for all working people?
Yes, we are. I mean, just like the VA, because the VA has slowly been privatized. There is a program within TSA that actually allows privatization of airports. So SFO itself actually started as a private screening force. So there's a pathway for airport authorities to do that. We are actually looking into that program. It's called the oh gosh, escapes me. We talk about it all the time. But the privatization program does allow a local authority to choose what kind of screening force, federal workforce or private work screening force. And actually they are not affected. And I think the biggest argument that they're going to say is because their contracts are already paid. They're going to say that private screening forces are not affected by shutdowns, but we have legislation that would make it so that federal workers would not be affected by shutdowns. So we're trying to make it so that essential employees can still get paid and there's no lapse of pay.
Well, the Congress people are still being paid.
Yes, they are. And that's kind of sad. That leads to kind of a weird moral hazard in my opinion.
They're telling the workers you're not going to get paid, but they're still getting paid.
Yeah.
So it's a bill to change that. And of course it didn't go anyplace. But the issue again of privatization, outsourcing, these outsourced screeners What are their conditions and benefits? Do they compare with what public screeners are being paid?
I had done a little bit of research on this on the screening force in San Francisco, and from what I saw, their upfront salary and wages were a little bit more, but their back end, like retirement benefits, some of the other benefits that they get, they do not get. So they do not get a pension system. Federal workers are under FERS, the Federal Employee Retirement System. So that is accrued over the time that we work. I think they have a totally different contract, which is, from what I had read, was not nearly as good as AFGE's, the one that we bargained for. And what ours is, we are getting even more rights in our current contract negotiations. So I think a lot of the things that even though they're supposed to be paid comparably to what we're paid, I don't think the value that they get from their employment is the value that, I think it's less than what we get, in my opinion.
So they're working, doing the same work you were doing, but they're not getting pensions as.
No, they're not getting pensions. I think
that's a big issue. That's
yes.
a big.
I mean, that leads to the pensions are what lead to like a lot of longevity and quality of life after retirement. A 401k system. We have a public side 401k. For us, it's called the TSP, and it's incredible. It's phenomenal. So we have two modes plus our Social Security.
That's an incentive for people to stay with the agency and to continue to work there if you have a pension, and you're going to be able to retire with a pension after your situation comes in the midst of a strike wave. The UAW workers are on strike for a 32-hour work week for 40 hours pay for a cost of living clause against two tiers. And I would say you have two tiers in the screeners industry if some people are not getting the same benefits as public screeners. What do you think about what's going on in this country? Because I know both Biden and Trump went to Michigan to talk to the workers. It seems like workers in the United States are getting more and more fed up. They can't survive. They're angry about how they're treated. Do you think that this is going to grow, this strike wave and the anger of working people in this country?
I think they are, and I'm here for it. I love it. I mean, as a federal worker, we are not allowed to strike. So, I mean, you already know that. You probably already know that. The most famous event, obviously, being Reagan and Patco, just firing the entire air traffic controller workforce. I don't think Biden would ever do anything like that if that happened today. But me myself, I'm going to be participating in more strikes. My brother is actually in Kaiser, so he'll be participating. He's in the Kaiser system. He'll be participating in that strike, and I'll be walking the picket line with him. But I'm hoping that this brings a lot of awareness. I mean, everybody's known subconsciously for a long time that wages have not kept up with the cost of living or inflation, and that companies keep on gutting us for as much as we're worth, more than we're worth. And it's led to a loss of purchasing power all around. And so that's led to the decline of, the middle class. So I'm hoping that the strikes keep on coming, and we can take all of these things back.
And it seems like it would be important to have a united front of all workers.
Yeah.
So all workers are together. It's not just about UAW. It's not just about Kaiser. It's all the same, really, struggle.
Yes. We're all in this together, and for solidarity. And that's why I think more education on the AFL-CIO and like local central labor councils are very essential on organizing unions from different industries to work together. So we work with our local CLC, the Sacramento CLC. And actually last time, 2018, 2019, when we organized a rally at our airport, they actually showed up. All the other unions showed up to rally with us. There were actually more, because a lot of our workers were so scared to rally. I mean, understandably, the bulk of the activists that showed up were people that were outside of TSA. It was a large group too. So I would stress the participation of unions in their local CLCs and becoming affiliated.
So you feel that, the rest of the labor movement should unite to defend you and your fellow workers.
Yes, because attack on one worker is attack on all. I mean, that's why unions exist.
Okay, well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. We've been talking with Gilbert Galam. He's with AFGE Local 1230, a TSA employee, and he's a legislative and political coordinator who's talking about the last shutdown, what the effect of the employees were, his members, and also the upcoming shutdown. So thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Okay, go on. Why don't you talk about AI and what you think about it.
Oh, I mean, I think that AI they're a threat to a lot of work that humans can't even like only work that humans can do, like work that requires, human touch. And I know it's starting to dive into like healthcare for us. They're trying to incorporate more technology to replace the screener, but I think that these issues should be addressed now in contracts, like what the Writers Guild is doing, or the writer strike is doing. They're so far ahead. It kind of amazes me that we should be looking at these things and just trying to figure out how we're going to help the worker for the future.
Well, Goldman Sachs has said that 350 million workers may lose their jobs around the world as a result of AI. So I think that the robo taxis and robo trucks, Gavin Newsom just vetoed a bill to require that
Yeah.
if you have a truck over 10,000 pounds, you have to have a driver. Apparently, he's going to leave it to the tech companies to protect our health and safety.
Oh God. Even if it doesn't, if it doesn't shake out where like we cannot protect ourselves, workers cannot end up like, losing to AI. And I think it's the government's job to step up and help the worker out, like people that lose their jobs. The government has a responsibility, especially if they're having such a huge influence on the industry like that, like, with like what Gavin's doing. That's the responsibility, and that's what we elect them to do, right?
I mean, it seems like all of California was united, all the legislature.
Yeah.
Only 3 votes against it. All of labor in California was united, calling on him to sign that bill, and he just vetoed it. What does that say about who he's looking out for? He is running for president.
Yeah, that's gonna be on my mind for when he's thinking about running for president. I don't know. I don't know how I'm gonna reconcile that in the ballot box when he comes up. So, I mean, although he's done a lot for us. So he's actually trying to set up a during the 2018-2019 government shutdown. He actually had set up unemployment insurance for federal workers. It was kind of late, so we weren't able to access it, but now we're trying to get the ball rolling before the shutdown even happens, so we can have that program available for our TSOs.
And there is a bill that says that if you are on strike, you're able to get unemployment. And of course, your members, if they're forced to work. I mean, the idea that you're forced to work and not getting paid, is that slave labor?
Yeah, that is. It's ludicrous. Like, who in their right mind would do that? So, I mean, the fact that TSOs showed up during the last shutdown, that really just shows their commitment to the American people.
And of course, the contract workers who are laid off, they're not going to get any kind of payment afterwards. I mean,
no, they don't. Which is that's sad in itself. So
basically they're throwing them out of work, and many of these people are in difficult situations as it is.
Yeah, it's a pity.
So maybe a united campaign of all workers. I mean, many of these contract workers are probably even unorganized. They don't even have a union.
As far as I know, I don't know about all the contract workers. I know that SFO is organized. I don't know about the other airports. But I think SFO, before they became regulated by TSA, they had a union even before they came in. So I think they are under SEIU, but they might be one off. I don't know about the other privatized airports. I can't speak for them. So they might be in a situation where they're not organized.
Okay, well, good. I want to thank you again for joining us on WorkWeek, and hopefully when there is a shutdown, we hope that there isn't, there'll be solidarity with your members, with you and your members, to get you back to work, and also to end this attack on public workers by the Congress, and continuing the attack on 2018, 2019. Apparently that's a tactic now that's being used on working people.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for having me.